So I apologize that I haven't posted last week. I had planned to, but obviously the shooting of Charlie Kirk kind of upended things, and thus I'm going to use this as my subject as Charlie Kirk, since a lot of has been happening since then. First, I'm going to state this: whether you are Charlie Kirk, Obama, Trump, a MAGA supporter, or not a MAGA supporter, each person in America is unique in that we all have the right to what we believe and how we live. The American Constitution is designed to protect people's rights. Now, what you believe may not be what I believe, and I can tell you to go away. It's where you cross that line and continue on and start focusing on more and more that we begin to have a problem. Charlie Kirk obviously was an actor from Hollywood. He walked away from it. That was his choice. Was he a good actor? I didn't think so. But again, that's my opinion. You out there may have a different opinion. It is said that Charlie made an impact in college campuses by, at 18, starting I guess it's a youth movement focusing on college campuses to enable them to get more involved in politics. I have an issue with that statement in that I was involved in politics long before Charlie ever came on scene, and we had a very active campus when it came to being politically motivated, to do something to make change, things that would impact us as students. So that may be what everyone else believes. I don't. Did Charlie have faith? Yes. He very strongly believed in what he believed. And as things do, his religious beliefs evolved. And notice the term religious. I reserve the term for anyone, to call anyone, I should say, Christian, because I have a kind of measure, if you will. If you try to tell me you are a Christian, I'm going to ask you one question. When was the last time you were feeding the homeless? When was the last time you gave a street person a hug? When was the last time you reached out to someone who had just been thrown out of their home? And I say that not lightly, because most of you may be aware of Mother Teresa and her Sisters of Mercy. A friend of mine visited with them for a month, and it impacted him. And to deviate a little bit, why it impacted him, there was a short nun, he said, about 5 foot, and they were called to go out to rescue a girl. In India, these are called untouchables. The girl had had hot water thrown at her, so she had 30-degree burns, all because she was asking for scraps of food or to eat from the garbage. The restaurant owner then threw her in the garbage. Someone called the sisters. They went to go rescue her. Well, because she was injured and thrown in the garbage, rats were chewing on her. The nun hands him a club and says, beat the rats off, beat the rats off. He froze. His mind just went, he said. And finally the nun jumped in the garbage, started beating the rats off of her who were eating her, and then yelled, "Help me get her." Now, she was pretty bad condition. By the time they got her to their facility, she didn't survive. Shortly after arriving, she died. And later that night, he found that same night and said, "How can you?" And she looked and smiled and said, "How can you not?" Charlie didn't fit that. I've watched him. I've listened to him. I didn't agree with him. There were some points he had were interesting. And looking at them, I could see where he came by that. But has Charlie evolved into what we call Christian nationalism? He got more bitter with his rhetoric targeting specific people or specific groups and making statements that flat out incited people. For example, on his show on January 23rd of last year, or the 24th of last year, he said, if I see a black pilot, I'm going to be like, boy, I hope you're qualified. The term boy is very offensive to a black person. Upon hearing of Taylor Swift's engagement, he said, you need to reject your feminism, submit to your husband, and remember, Taylor, you're not in charge. And that was on the 2nd of August. So, and then responding to a question regarding if his 10-year-old daughter were raped, what would be his response? Well, she would have the baby. And I understand that. But other than a religious sense, and also some things based within the Bible, some of them taken out of context, unfortunately, abortion is not a medical issue. I personally don't believe in it. My thoughts are, everyone, whether you're religious or not religious, you need to teach your daughters to keep their legs closed, and you need to teach your teenage boys to keep their zippers up. Plain and simple. Now, if there's a rape victim, they need to have the right to choose. You can't force them to have a reminder so that they're constantly reliving that rape. In that, you become complicit in that rape if you force them to do that. It's a hard decision for me to make, but I also understand what a woman must be going through. And then he once said about the trans community that we needed a Nuremberg-style trial for every gender-affirming clinic doctor, and we needed immediately, inferring that every doctor needed to be killed. And he once even supported the idea that the LGBTQ should be killed. They should be put in concentration camps because they're a moral stain, is what he called them at one point. So Charlie has the faith, but Charlie's words were another story. He once said that there is no separation of church and state, that it was a fabrication and myth and wasn't in the Constitution. He believed that the Civil Rights Act was a destructive force in America, and he blamed Martin Luther King for that law and believed that Martin Luther himself was a destructive person because he was now forcing America not to be white again. He also said that blacks had it better in the 1940s under the Jim Crow laws. He said no crimes were committed. In reality, crimes were committed, they just weren't recorded. So taking statements like this, you have an issue. He also was actively talking that we need to bring religion back, religion back, religion back. Well, there is an establishment clause and a free exercise clause in the Constitution. The establishment clause prohibits the government from establishing a religion, much like the Church of England was established by King Henry VIII. That was the whole reason behind that. They didn't want another church religion. The Pilgrims had just come from the English Reformation under Cromwell, in which Cromwell forced them to wear black. They couldn't wear color. They couldn't celebrate Christmas. They couldn't celebrate Easter because they were evil. They were against the Bible. They wanted to worship as they wanted to when they came into the U.S. This is why they came here. However, they soon broke from that. William Penn established Pennsylvania to get away from them because they were persecuting them for not believing like they did. And then later on, of course, the Salem witch trials, and then the Trail of Tears, and finally the kidnapping of Native American children to be forced to assimilate like the white men. Religious leaders called them heathens, much like they called the Hawaiians heathens, and eventually in Hawaii forced the abdication of their queen Liliuokalani. This is all part of American history. It's what makes us America. It's what gives us such a big view. Charlie didn't agree with that. He said, we were established by God to be a Christian nation, to bring Christianity to, well, we weren't. The idea was to give everyone the freedom. That idea of the wall of separation actually came because of Thomas Jefferson in responding to a letter from the Danbury Baptist Church that wanted the government to establish the Baptist Church as the national religion. He wouldn't do it because he remembered how England was under the Church of England. Now, interestingly enough, there are some things in the Constitution which I guess Charlie just overlooked. First was Article 6. No religious test shall be required as a qualification for any office or public trust. Trump recently established the Committee of Religious Affairs. Highly illegal because it not only breaks that 6th, but also the 14th Amendment, which restricts making laws which respect an establishment of a religion. Also, it breaks public trust. He's favoring one religious affiliation and forcing others to believe that. America is not one religious affiliation. By way of Christianity, you have the agnostics, you have the atheists, you have those that really don't care either way. Baptist, Lutheran, Catholic, Protestant, Mormon, Native American beliefs. So you can't just say Christianity is what we're going to do. And more alarming, the government, and Charlie supported this, is allowing office workers to proselytize their workers. They can't do that. That's against the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment also applies to these states that are making the Ten Commandment laws or the laws restricting LGBTQ, favoring religious curriculum, or in the case of Oklahoma, trying to rewrite history using a religious text. So I say all of this because there's two sides to this story. And unfortunately, people are losing their jobs or being ostracized for their observations or their personal beliefs or their First Amendment speech. Schools and colleges in obviously predominantly red states have fired professors, forced out a dean, and come after schools who refuse to support Charlie Kirk. Well, not everybody supported him. Charlie may have been a man of faith, but he had some very vicious words for people. If you listen to his speech, he isn't the saint everyone wants us to be. And I'm not saying that to deride him. That was his right. Charlie had the right to be who he was. Interesting enough, when doing this research, I discovered his wife is pursuing a doctorate in biblical studies, and of all places, Liberty University. So now, here's a question. Liberty University was established by the moral majority. This was a group that was later labeled a cult in the late 80s, early 90s, somewhere around in there, because of their leader and founder. They became Liberty University after he died, but they promote one thing, this Christian nationalism that were being forced on Americans. They believe that America should have Christian religious law, well, not Christian, religious laws. They're the ones that are behind the movements, along with the Heritage Foundation, for overturning Roe versus Wade. Well, here's something that's interesting on that too. And I know I'm deviating, and follow me with my line of thought. Recently, Justice Amy Barrett, in talking about her book, said that the Supreme Court doesn't have the right to enforce its beliefs on the American people. True. The Supreme Court has the duties to protect the rights of the American people. In reversing Roe versus Wade, they started supporting the Christian view that abortion is evil. Not all the justices believed that, but enough of them did to overturn it. So here we have Charlie, We have him, oh, well, I was just having a discussion. But what kind of discussion does it become when you ridicule somebody for what they believe? When you go online, because these are also documented, to, like a coworker said, they thought it was interesting that they had this trans person. So you identify as woman, Charlie said. Yes. Well, have you had your period? Most women, some women don't have periods. Have you gotten pregnant? No. Well, Charlie, in response to that, I would have asked Charlie, so you believe in God? And he would have obviously said yes. Well, here's another question. Have you sat down and had lunch with God? Have you two sat side by side or talked one on one? Then I would have asked him, how do you know he's real? You know? So, in things like this, he was using the Bible as a weapon. And I don't say that lightly. You're going to disagree with me, and that's fine. Everyone has their beliefs. But there's a scripture in Matthew 26, verse 52. This took place in the Garden of Gethsemane, when one of the apostles drew a sword and struck the servant of the high priest, cutting his ear off, and then Jesus put it back. He healed him right there, one of the last acts. But he said, those who live by the sword will die by the sword. Now, figuratively, that means the sword represents any form of aggression or harmful action or speech. What am I saying? Charlie's death was not warranted. And that's going to affect some other people. However, like some things in America, when you stir people up enough, they're going to react. And in this case, they did react. And unfortunately, Charlie was shot. Now, everything else that's happening after this, that's wrong. Just yesterday, Jimmy Kimmel. I reviewed Jimmy Kimmel's words, and what he spoke was the truth. He basically didn't say anything that was out of line, nothing that warranted how ABC came down on him. Jimmy made a simple, truthful statement. The shooter, Charlie Kirk's killer, was not a Republican. He was a Trump supporter, and he was MAGA. He wasn't some far left anti-religious nut. He was MAGA. We don't know what was going on in the killer's head. We may never know, because that's not something people look at. I do, though, have the question is, how did he make such an accurate shot? Think about it. If he was on the roof, they say 300 feet. Was the shooter a sniper? Was he trained? These are questions that are not being answered. I highly respect Governor of Utah right now, because he said something very important. We cannot react to violence with violence. We can't react negatively if something is negative about this. And yet that's exactly what some things are happening. Jimmy Kimmel, professors, even government employees. Do I think that he deserves to have the flag lowered? No, but then I'm looking at it as a veteran. Should he have been brought home on Air Force Two? No, but that was the current government's decision. Should he be given a state funeral? No. Charlie wasn't anything special. He just knew how, as an actor, he knew how to use the script to reach the people. I'm not saying yay or nay for Charlie. Many of you out there will do and make what you need to. I'm just pointing out some of the things that he said, and these are documented on his Charlie Kirk show. You can listen to them. and you will listen to some of the things that he said. By your words shall you know a man. It's another biblical saying. The biggest one that these religious people forget is love one another as I have loved you. I don't recall anywhere in the Bible that Jesus or God himself said, hate one another as I have hated you. Judge one another as I have judged you. Am I judging? No. This is my opinion. I'm pointing out just some things that I've been thinking through, which is why this video has taken so long to put together. What do we need to do from here? This is another example of where we need to step away from the negative parts of it and unite to move forward to make America again. America right now is not the America that I grew up in. It's far worse. And this coming after everybody, shooting people, not a good thing. So I'll let you know. Charlie Kirk should be a man known for his faith because he was very strong in his religious beliefs. I use the term religious, as I explained, because a lot of his religious beliefs were not Christian beliefs. There's a difference. And I really strongly believe this is why a lot of the faith leaders, as they're calling them, have come against some of these laws like the Ten Commandments and everything, because they understand there's a difference between religion and Christianity. Some of you may post some hateful stuff. I'll read it. I may or may not respond. It just depends on the validity of your point. Look at and know your Constitution. Know your history. I was always taught to accept people for who they are. They may believe different, they may live different, they may do things different in their house. That's none of my business. They're an American like I am. My mother, whenever they came to nationality, never put down that she was Hispanic. She always put down, I'm an American. And she told me, that's what we are. We're not this, that, or the other thing. We're Americans. So why are we allowing this ethnicity question to divide us? Now we have something else that people are trying to use to divide us, the shooting of Charlie Kirk. Again, Charlie had his faith. He needs to be respected for that. Charlie had his thoughts. Those were his beliefs. Were they my beliefs? No. I don't see a person as straight, gay, trans, normal, cis, whatever. I see a person for what's in their heart. I see how they serve their community, how they reach out, how they treat people that are not like them. Those that stick their nose up in the air, as my mom and grandmother used to say, those who speak words like some of the ones I read to you from Charlie's own words, I don't think that they are the example that Christianity needs. You need to question everything. And remember, you need to like yourself for yourself, because there's no one in this world like you. Don't let someone else define you. You define yourself. I want to say that in closing. Never let someone define you. You define yourself.